Great question from Anton Lopa. How do you guys feel about loads of complexes and beginner programs over just variations and classic lifts? So, if you think about the purpose of complexes and variations, they are to address specific issues that you have as a lifter or that one of your lifters have. So, when you start weightlifting, you don't have any issues. You haven't developed issues. You haven't had time to learn weightlifting, have particular favourables part of a lift and particular weak parts of a lift. All your lift is shit. So when you use a lot of complexes and variations as a beginner athlete, what you typically end up doing is just wasting time letting them develop an athlete. So usually at the weightlifting, and you'll see what, now this is within reason of course, but if you look at our beginner weightlifting program, it's mostly just snatch, clean and jerk, reasonable weights of front squats. We push the strength and deadlifts a lot in this and accessory work as well, but there's mostly just snatch, clean, jerk. Now, there's a difference between, high rep snatches and a little bit of variation. When we're talking about is when you're straying into realms like the clock off complex, you're doing things like 4 or 5 different variations of a clean or a snatch in one aspect, 2 different overhead variations. That's just too far away from the full lift for beginners to develop any kind of familiarity with the lifts. So typically what you'll see is with a lot of things in life and sports is there's kind of a bell curve in relation to an athlete's experience level and then the level of variation of their program. So as they get more experience towards the middle, for intermediate athletes, we'll see most of the variation and most of the loading of this variation because this is very, very useful for those athletes. And then as we get towards the end on the other side of the curve, then we just see loads of snatch and clean and jerk and some very specific variation that the athlete has picked up along the way that they will favour for their training. Like for example, Miso will do stuff like his Miso cleans or his heaving hang clean complex, and then basically no other variation in his clean and jerk training. Or we'll see Gabriel would do stuff like mostly just clean and jerk 3 times a week and then a little bit of power clean sometimes, but absolutely zero variation in his clean and jerk. And his snatch, he used to do, I think it was literally snatch and power snatch, no hangs, no blocks, towards the last maybe literally 10 years of his training. So variations are for specific issues all times.
Yeah, I think so. I was talking to an athlete yesterday who's coming on board for some coaching, and he was saying he hadn't done a full snatch or a full clean and jerk in like 4 months or something because everything he did was in a complex. And people get down this rabbit hole of like, oh, you're building capacity, like every time you do a snatch, do an overhead squat because you're weak overhead, or every time you do a clean, you do a clean pull beforehand because your clean pull is weak. You really do need to be specific with your training. And the people who need to be specific the most are the people who are just learning that movement for the first time due to the fact they've never done the movement. They don't know where they're weak. They don't know where they just need to actually learn that pattern.